Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport and our second instalment of Carspiracy theories. We're heading back to the decade of leg warmers and minor strikes. It's 1984 and there's trouble brewing in the pit lane, specifically at the Tyrrell garage. Of course, this is the infamous lead shot controversy, but the incident in question is not the spiracy we are looking at, rather the outcome. So sit back and get comfy for this edition of Carspiracy Theories. So, Tyrrell. They were pretty successful once upon a time. They began life in the late 50s, and after coming into Formula 1 attached to the French Matra team, Tyrrell soon rose to both teams and drivers' championships, courtesy of Scott legend Jackie Stewart, who would win 3 championships with Tyrrell. They would never have that level of success ever again. Jody Scheckter and Patrick DePiler would take wins for the team throughout the 70s, but they slipped further into the field as the 80s went on. Michele Alboreto would take what would turn out to be their final ever win in 1983, with Alboreto and Danny Sullivan struggling for results all year. Tyrrell signed 2 new drivers for 1984. 1983 British F3 runner-up Martin Brundle, who was only 25 at the time, and Belgian Stefan Beloff. Both were making their debuts in Formula 1. The 1984 car was an updated version of the 012 that was introduced in 1983. The team had lost the very financially beneficial sponsorship of fashion brand Benetton to the Alfa Romeo team, and instead had microcomputer manufacturer Systeme Computers Limited, hence the hideously ugly brown livery displayed on the cars, which is so delightfully 80s. Most importantly, the car had the Ford Cosworth DFY normally aspirated engine, an upgrade of the legendary DFV engine. This was the only non-turbocharged engine on the 1984 grid. And that is the frothy cream on top of whatever atrocity is considered coffee these days. So how did the Tyrrell team get on during the 1984 season? Pretty well, actually. Despite Michele Alboreto taking a win in 1983, he only finished in the points one other time, and Danny Sullivan only managed it once. Martin Brundle finished 5th on debut at Brazil. Beloff got a point at his home Grand Prix and 5th at Imola. At Monaco, Beloff finished 3rd and was even catching the leaders. This was the only time he got on the podium in his short Formula 1 career. Then the best result of the year so far. Martin Brundle managed to bring the Tyrrell home in 2nd place at Detroit. An incredible result for the team. But that was when the trouble started. So now for a look at the confusing rules regarding engines in Formula 1 cars in the 1980s. Turbo engines are different from normally aspirated engines. I know, I'm very clever. The normally aspirated cars were lighter and therefore needed to find a way to make the minimum weight limits. So, as had been the practice over the last few years, they would add ballast tanks to the car and fill them with liquid, therefore making the weight. And teams did what teams do best. They found ways to make this work to their advantage. They would lead a line to the brakes, water-cooled brakes. Very clever, and it could be emptied whilst racing, meaning the car was lighter and faster. The car would pit and the tank refilled, so when it was weighed during post-race scrutineering, everything would be fine. The car would be considered compliant, and no one was the riser. As the only normally aspirated team in 1984, these rules only applied to Tyrrell, and they found an interesting way to empty the tanks so the car ran light during the race, and get the weight back up before the race ended, and it involved lead pellets. Yes, the worst place to be on a Formula 1 grid in 1984 was the garage next door to Tyrrell, because the car was known to shoot lead shot in all directions during pit stops. Because the cars ran light, they would come in to get a fill-up of 2 gallons of water and 140 pounds of lead shot, filled under heavy pressure, causing the car to spit out some of the lead shot. This is obviously against the rules. You can't really consider a Formula 1 car shooting lead shot at other teams fair play, so the FIA looked into the matter and it was found the water in the Tyrrell contained 27.5% aromatics, and therefore could be considered an illegal fuel source, along with being charged with illegal fuel lines and taking on illegal ballast. Tyrrell were dead to rights. They were so very guilty. They were disqualified from the championship, and the team and drivers were stripped of all points. So, what's the conspiracy? Well, many over the years have felt the punishment was overly harsh. So, why did the FIA slap a season-long disqualification on the Tyrrell team, as well as banning them for the rest of the season? For which FISA, a subcommittee of the FIA, fined them for their absence. And they lost travel subsidies for the 1985 season, a huge cost for a small independent team swimming in manufacturer-backed shark-infested waters. Sharks with multiple engines for each race, with 1,600 brake horsepower that would explode after one lap. Well, simply put, the conspiracy is that they wanted to get rid of the last normally aspirated engine on the grid. The future of F1 was turbocharged, and Tyrrell was simply standing in the way. On further analysis, the water was found to contain less than 1% and was well within the rules. And there was a loophole for the lead ballast, involving the rules being unclear whether the ballast had to be fixed in place and removed with tools, which technically the lead shot was. So after Tyrrell appealed to the FIA Court of Appeal, the FIA just changed the charges. Essentially, illegal fuel, unsecured ballast and holes on the underside of the car in an era of ground effect, completely flat-bottomed cars. The FIA essentially did Tyrrell dirty. I can't find any information on this for certain, but for the first test to say 27.5% and another to say less than 1% of aromatics in the water, that's a big difference and sounds like a fix to me. With Tyrrell gone, the turbo teams were free to make any turbo-friendly rule changes they wanted, and they did. The FIA, who hoped a full turbo grid would encourage more manufacturers and sponsors to join the F1 circus, had got their way, and Tyrrell had paid the price. There is no doubt this is a conspiracy theory. The FIA pulled off a shady coup to get what they wanted. It didn't attract any manufacturers to the grid. Turbos were phased out after 1988, and the FIA has all the foresight of a mole with its own head up its arse. So what happened after? Well, Tyrrell would switch to turbo Renault engines midway through 1985, but never hit the highs of years gone by again. Over the next decade they get a few podiums, but nothing to really shout home about. They sold up to British American Racing in 1997. Ken Tyrrell left after he was overruled on driver choice, wanting Jos Verstappen instead of Ricardo Rossi, and the Tyrrell team disappeared from the grid after scoring no points in 1998. BAR shambled on for a while before becoming Honda, Braun, and eventually Mercedes, continuing on the success of the early Tyrrell years. Ken Tyrrell himself passed away in 2001, a notable legend in motorsport circles. Martin Brundle returned to the team for 1985 and 1986, before embarking on a long association with Formula One that continues to this current day, while sadly, the very talented Stefan Beloff was killed in a crash during a sports car race at Spa in 1985. And of course, the FIA have kept their nose clean and not been associated with any shady business ever again after this moment in Formula One history. So that was today's Carspiracy theory. Let me know in the comments what videos you'd like to see in the future, and let me know your thoughts on this video. Were Tyrrell screwed by the FIA, or did they deserve their punishment after playing fast and loose with the rules? Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more motorsport, loads of videos on the horizon, and we are about to embark on another year of exciting motorsport action. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.